Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of How to HR, episode number 32 we are up to. How are you? I hope you're well and having a fabulous week. If you're joining us live, let me know in the comments, and if you're catching the replay, you get any aha moments out of today's episode, just put hashtag replay in the comments and let me know what you found useful about today's episode of How to HR. If you are brand new to our weekly video series, welcome. It is fabulous to have you here. My name's Kristy-Lee. I'm the host of this video series. I also own and run a HR consultancy business known as the Footprint Group. I'm the host of the People Powered Business podcast and creator of the People Powered HR membership community for small to medium-sized business owners. Now, How to HR is a weekly video series that we host live here inside our Facebook group, as well as over on YouTube each and every week, where I bring you a snippet, a strategy, a little tactic or tool that you can use when it comes to building your amazing team. Because the thing I know to be true is this: you cannot build a business that delivers you the success that you seek by however you want to measure that, financial, profit, whatever it is, as well as the freedom you desire without the right team. You can build a business that gives you all the success you want if you want to work 80 hours a week and never be able to take a break. But if you want that true lifestyle freedom that most of us get into business craving, because I certainly know I didn't get into business because I wanted to work 80 hours a week, you really do need a team around you, and not just any team. You've got to build your winning team. It's about having the right people in the right roles at the right time for your business journey, and about making sure you then know what to do with those people, how to leverage them to get the most out of them, to ensure they're highly engaged so that you have a productive and profitable business that you love running and that you get to take a break from, and things don't fall apart. In fact, things run smoothly without you. And this is exactly what I teach business owners, leaders, and managers. Now, on this week's episode of How to HR, I'm talking about something that is near and dear to my heart. If you were to ask me, one of my key philosophies and values when it comes to my role in the space I work in, it is this: I feel I have an obligation to tell you what you need to know, even though that may not be what you want to hear. I truly believe I have an obligation to do that, and clients that work with me know that that is true. And despite sometimes it not being what you want to hear, my job is to tell you what you need to know. And I was thinking about this topic recently and, just digging down a little as to where that might have come from. And I was certainly the kid that didn't necessarily just take instructions as the only answer. I asked, but why, a lot. And I very often spoke my mind. Now, if you were that kind of kid, you will resonate exactly with what I'm talking about. I didn't necessarily just toe the line where required. It did get me into a little bit of trouble from time to time along the way as well. And I was thinking about how this translated into the work with the clients that I work with and how it works in their business. Because what I see show up so often is that business owners, leaders, and managers, generally, you guys are nice people. You want to be kind to people. You actually don't want to do the tough stuff and have awkward conversations and tell people things that may in fact, hurt their feelings or make them feel not very good. And in pursuit of that niceness and really sticking true to that, sometimes what that means is that as a business owner, you don't tell people what they need to know. You sugarcoat it or you avoid it, and you tell them something that's a little bit closer to what you know they want to hear, out of kindness, out of goodness, that you don't want to hurt their feelings and that you don't want to rain on their parade. Here's the thing though, doing that is actually unkind to our team. If we're telling people what they want to hear and not what they truly need to know, we're doing them a disservice. We're not being honest. They're not going to know when they're falling short and when they're missing expectations. And without that honesty, without that unapologetic honesty, they will never be able to improve. I've mentioned this before, but our team can't read our mind. As much as we might want them to, or perhaps we don't want them to, they simply can't. And if we're not being honest with them about whatever's happening at work, then they're not going to suddenly realize one day that they're underperforming. They're certainly not going to realize that they're missing the mark in any way because we haven't clearly articulated that to them. So despite our pursuit to be kind and to not want to upset people, we can actually be doing exactly that by being dishonest and failing to give them the guidance, the advice, the information that they really need to move ahead in their career, with your business, with their skills, whatever it is that we need to share with them. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And I was reflecting on this, and I've bought this book with me, bit of show and tell. If you haven't read this book, Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, it is a fabulous, fabulous book. And one of the things Brené talks about in this book, there's a quote in here that I use a lot, and it is, "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." And she talks in the book about kind of building a culture where difficult conversations, including honest and productive feedback, are avoided out of a culture of niceness, or because we lack the skills or courage to have that conversation. And what ends up happening, I'm going to quote this from the book, when we fix the wrong things for the wrong reason, the same problem continues to surface. It's costly and demoralizing. And what she's talking about is the fact that we're not focusing on what we need to do, which is telling people what they need to hear, but instead we're being kind, we're being nice, but we're doing people a disservice. And what will happen over and over again is we're going to be dealing with problem behavior and poor performance because we haven't been honest with our team. So instead of building the skills and courage we need to deal with whatever the issue is, we end up spending more time managing performance, managing behavioral issues, managing poor productivity, and all of those things that are a byproduct of our failure to have these conversations. And I think we avoid these conversations for a whole range of reasons. I think we certainly avoid these conversations because we possibly aren't really skilled in having them. I was having a conversation with someone just the other day where I was sharing the fact that we get into what we do in our career, in our business or someone else's business, because we're good at technically what we do. And then suddenly the next thing we do is step into a leadership role, but no one gives us any training on that. We're just expected to pick up those leadership skills as we go along. And I think that's actually really unfair, because this is not a natural thing for a lot of people. Managing people, leading people, it's not something we inherently know how to do. So many of us just didn't have the skills or don't have the skills to do it. We know that we need to be vulnerable to have these conversations because we're stepping outside of our comfort zone. And we also know we're going to make the person involved a little bit exposed and vulnerable as well. And we don't want to do that. We're being kind. We sometimes don't know what to deal with, what's going to come next, what the fallout's going to be of having to have this real conversation about what they really need to hear. And, it just requires courage. We've got to put our big girl or big boy pants on and get it done. And that, again, is uncomfortable for us. So you can see why it's really easy for us to fail to tell people what they need to hear. So I'm going to share with you 6 strategies that I recommend that might be helpful if you want to have conversations that tell people what they need to hear rather than what they want to hear necessarily. I'm going to run through them for you. Number 1 is to frame up the conversation. If you frame it up, letting them know straight off the bat, look, I've got to chat to you about something. I know this might be difficult for you to hear, or I know this is not necessarily what you want to hear, or I know this might come as a bit of a surprise to you because I haven't had this conversation with you before. Letting them know at the outset just gives them a moment to process that they kind of brace themselves that they're going to hear something that might be a bit tough, gets rid of that initial shock, and puts them in a headspace where they're more ready to listen to what you're about to say. Because if you just drop it in like a bombshell into a normal conversation, that kind of experience of shock means that they're not truly going to be hearing what it is that you need to tell them. So frame up the conversation. Tie it back to the why. Why do you need to tell them this? Why is it important to their role? Why is it important to the team and the business? How's it impacting others? Why is it important to have this conversation? People always want to understand that. And that's a really important aspect to talk about first. Communicate directly, specifically, authentically, and clearly with your employee. Explain very clearly, what is the problem? Why is it an issue? What needs to change? How are we going to measure that? Run through everything very, very clearly. It can be quite easy when we need to have these conversations to begin to waffle and to kind of really not be clear in our communication because we're getting nervous and we want to cover up the awkward silences. I encourage you not to do that. Be really clear with your communication. Open up a conversation with the employee about possibilities. What are the possible solutions? What are the possible causes? What are some other things that you haven't considered that they can share with you about their experience and how things got to be where they are? Get curious. One of my favorite sayings at the moment is curious is cool. We spend way too much time just accepting the status quo or accepting what we think in our mind is right, and we fail to get curious. Ask better questions. Ask why. Consider how. Really get curious as to how this has happened and what can be done to fix it. And finally, be solutions focused. Don't walk into a conversation like this with your team or with an individual employee without being ready to come out with a solution. Have some solutions in mind before you walk in, but be ready to listen to their alternative solutions as well. So just recap, frame up the conversation, explain the why, communicate directly, specifically, authentically, and clearly. Open up a conversation about possibilities, get really curious, and be solutions focused. You will find that although these conversations may not be easy, especially when you first start having them, you'll begin to realize that telling people what they need to know as opposed to what they want to hear is actually a really, really important step in creating a culture of honesty, of trust, of high performance, of high productivity, and of people that really want to work with each other every single day. You'll have a team that trusts you as the leader more. You'll have a team that trusts each other more. And the best thing is, once you start leading by example in having these conversations, it begins to become part of the fabric of your team and your organization. So you'll find your team are better equipped to have these conversations with each other in a really, really positive, not a negative or a critical, a really positive and solutions focused way. So if you find yourself leaning towards telling people what they want to hear rather than what they need to know, that is my message for you today. I know it's not the most fun part of your role, and just chatting to someone this week, they just said, if I just didn't have to do the people part, I would love my business. But it's not the reality, guys. You cannot build a business that's going to be as successful as you want it to be and give you any sense of freedom, financial and lifestyle freedom, unless you build your winning team. So I hope that's been useful for you today. That's a wrap up for episode number 32 of How to HR. And I'll be back next Thursday for next week's episode. In the meantime, though, if you have an aha moment from today's episode, pop it in the comments, whether you're catching it live or on the replay. And also, if you have a topic that you would like me to cover in a future episode of How to HR, please pop it in the comments. You can pop it in the comments under this video. Put it in a post inside the Facebook group if that's where you're watching this. Let me know if there's something that's niggling at you that you just don't quite, understand or, have the skill set for, or there's something that you're challenged by at the moment, or just something you're really curious to get more insight on. Let me know what it is. If it's anything at all to help you with building, managing, leveraging your team, hiring to firing and everything in between, you let me know and we will get it covered. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a fabulous rest of your Thursday and enjoy your week. And I'll be back again next week for next week's episode. Take care.